in just a moment how the quality of your diet and the role insulin plays could prevent your early death. Why has health become so complicated? And why is there so much confusion about what to eat to ensure we live as long as possible? Recently, researchers at Harvard University who spent decades looking into diet found that there are 4 common early or healthy eating patterns that can reduce the risk of an early death by up to 20%. The Mediterranean diet, plant-based, regular US dietary guidelines, and something called the Alternative Healthy Eating Index. Rates of cancer, cardiovascular risk, respiratory disease, neurodegenerative disease all dropped when study participants changed to healthier eating patterns. I'll be speaking with neurosurgeon Dr. David Johnson about healthy eating in just a moment.
You're with Steve Austin on ABC Radio Brisbane.
Well, Dr. David Johnson is a neurosurgeon in Brisbane who believes that food is medicine and medicine is food. I spoke to him today and asked him how he interprets this incredible Harvard study results.
Common sense that eating healthy is one of the pillars of health, right? So I sort of describe some fundamental pillars of health, and quality nutrition is one of those. And I think if you asked all of your listeners that whether eating well was important, they'd answer it correctly. That the answer is yes. But I think what the problem, what it comes down to, is people don't really know what is healthy, and they don't. And the definition for most people of what a healthy diet is very confusing, and that comes down to there being a lot of information out there, and when people Google, jump on the internet and try to find out a little bit more about healthy lifestyle and eating, there's just so many conflicting messages.
Yes. You call food medicine, as I understand it, and say that we've lost and you say that we've lost our understanding of what healthy food is. So just explain a bit more about that. I mean, I was raised by a mum who was a nurse, and she would make sure that we had fresh vegetables, steamed, fresh fruit as much as possible. Sure, we had other things, but the mainstay was as fresh as possible and as broad a range as possible of fresh vegetables, fresh fruit, as much as possible. That was how the family was raised. How do you see that we've lost a bit of our understanding of what healthy food is?
Yeah, well, it's not just me that says food is medicine. It's the grandfather of modern medicine, Hippocrates, said, "Let food be thy medicine," and it's the most powerful drug that we've ever consumed. But you mentioned fresh fruit and vegetables and those type of things, which everyone would sort of think, oh, that's pretty good. But the key thing that people are missing is that it's got to be taken into context with their existing metabolic health. And one of the key factors that a lot of people don't understand is whether or not they are insulin resistant or insulin sensitive. And some of your listeners may have heard of the term insulin resistance. And they've probably heard of the hormone insulin. And that's one of the key hormones that controls our metabolism and how we handle glucose. Right? And one of the sad things that I'll ask my patients is that, has your doctor checked whether you have diabetes or not? And they say, yes, my doctor's checked my blood glucose and it's perfect. But that doesn't tell them whether they are insulin resistant. Okay, so you could have a patient with high blood pressure, slightly overweight, maybe some cardiovascular disease, and they think they're metabolically healthy because their sugars are normal. But what's absolutely imperative is the patient must go and find out what their fasting insulin is, because it's the fasting insulin that is working overtime to keep the sugars normal. So yes, your blood sugar may be normal, but if your pancreas is working in overdrive to keep that normal, you are actually metabolically quite unhealthy, and you are therefore glucose intolerant. Okay, so for that individual, if they go and have lots of vegetables and fruit, they are only going to get sicker. Okay, that'll make them sicker. Whereas if you have someone like yourself growing up in your family and you are super insulin sensitive, vegetables and fruit is perfectly fine. Okay, so that's one of the key factors that people don't understand when they are trying to reacquire a healthy metabolism. It's whether or not they are insulin sensitive or whether they've progressed towards insulin resistance.
So how can I ask my doctor the right question? Because often asking the doctor the right question, any journalist will tell you that the question determines the answer. So how do I ask the right question of a doctor if I'm struggling with weight or struggling with health and we're looking at sort of what I'm eating?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's one of the there's many measurements that we can make in medicine to determine health, and body weight, in fact, is actually not a very good measurement, or it's not a very good metric of health. So your absolute body weight or your BMI is actually found to be a very poor indicator of true health. There are things like the fasting insulin. There are inflammatory markers. There are measurements such as waist-height ratio. Those are far superior measurements for that indicate metabolic health. There's our lipid profile, and a lot of people will be looking at the lipid profile and saying, "Oh, my cholesterol is high," and in actual fact, a total cholesterol measurement is very, very almost useless in terms of determining lipid health. What you really want to know is what type of lipid profile do I have in regards to triglycerides and a type of low density lipoprotein called the small dense subunit. So that's what your doctor has to kind of delve a little bit more deeply into. So my recommendation would be this: get your fasting insulin and ask for a sub-fraction cholesterol profile. So a sub-fraction analysis of your LDL particle and your triglyceride. And if your doctor just looks at you a little bit inquisitively and goes, "Oh, I don't really know what that means," then I would just recommend that you go and talk to someone who actually does that on a regular basis. And I'm a neurosurgeon, Steve, and I want to get my patients super healthy before they have surgery, or regardless of whether they need surgery, get them metabolically healthy. And I will request sub-fraction analysis of LDL, fasting insulin, and then I can then direct them towards a diet that restores that into the normal range. And then we start to see those other things come good as well, like their blood pressure, their energy levels. Yes, they will lose a little bit of body weight as well, but that body weight itself is not the super metric of health.
My guest is Dr. David Johnson, neurosurgeon. He has a bit of a mantra, if you like. He believes that food is medicine and medicine is food. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. Steve Austin's my name. So, David, just sort of redefine for me, just encapsulate for me your definition of healthy food and its role in fighting disease, just so as we get it I get it in my mind. Your definition of healthy food and role in fighting disease.
Fantastic. Well, you talked about lots of different diets, the Harvard study, Mediterranean diets, ketogenic diets, carnivore diets, fruit and vegetables versus low carb. The key thing that you should be focusing on is what I refer to as the LIFE diet, and that is low insulin food for everyone, LIFE, low insulinemic food for everyone. And by doing that, you keep your metabolic health super healthy, and you can restore the condition of metabolic syndrome or insulin resistance. If you have high levels of insulin sensitivity, then you have earned the right to apply the 80-20 rule. Okay, that means 80% of the time I'm eating good, low insulinemic food. 20% of the time on the weekends I can go out and have some fish and chips and a beer and some ice cream. But the 80-20 rule only applies from a position of health. Okay, if you're unhealthy, which a lot of us are, the 80-20 rule does not apply. You have to apply the 100-100 rule, which means getting your insulin sensitivity back.
What sort of foods help me get my insulin sensitivity back, can you say? Is it relatively straightforward or not?
Okay. So loss of insulin sensitivity, i.e. insulin resistance, is synonymous with glucose intolerance. Okay. Not sugar, but glucose. Sugar has glucose within it, but a potato has glucose within it. A potato in someone who has insulin resistance looks exactly like a Mars bar. All right. So if you have insulin resistance and you are glucose intolerant, and you go and eat a bowl of rice or a bowl of porridge or a banana, your pancreas doesn't know that that glucose is a potato. It just sees it as glucose and it is intolerant to the glucose. And that's what then drives the damaging effects of, glycation and high levels of triglycerides and very poor lipid profile with high levels of triglyceride and the bad subfraction of LDL. So that's the key factor is keeping your glucose levels down if you are insulin resistant, less than 50 grams a day. And remember, one potato probably has about one slice of bread even probably has about 10 to 15 grams of glucose in it, one slice of bread. So that's a sandwich, therefore, would have about 4 to 6 teaspoons of sugar, a sandwich. And that's not going to be well tolerated by someone who's insulin resistant. If you're insulin sensitive, then you can enjoy that sandwich without a concern.
My guest is Dr. David Johnson, Brisbane neurosurgeon. We're talking food and food quality and insulin resistance, if you like. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. Dave, so finally, we know that type 2 diabetes is a really big issue in this country, and I talk to medics privately, and they're worried that the effects surrounding type 2 diabetes, usually lifestyle reasons, are going to crush our health system because it has so many knock-on effects on the human body.
Absolutely huge. Yeah.
Why has being healthy or trying to be healthy become so complicated? It's 2023. We're talking about putting people on Mars. We're changing genetic coding in people with with all sorts of medicine and what have you. Yet putting the stuff we put in our mouth, we still haven't got sorted out.
Isn't it mad? It's absolutely crazy, and you're bringing to the forefront a very important, profound thing, is that being healthy should not be complicated. Being healthy should not be complicated. A little baby comes out of the tummy, comes out of their mum, and does exactly what it's hardwired to do. It starts drinking, it starts suckling milk. Okay, it knows what to do. And likewise, it is actually hardwired in our brain as to what is healthy. If you go back thousands of years, our prehistoric ancestors didn't have to think about what to eat. They just saw a buffalo or whatever it is, a fish, a duck, and they killed it and they ate it. Right now, we come into modern society, and there is just so much conflicts of interest and purposeful muddying of the waters. So, the food star rating system, the red tick, this, and I think your listeners will be well aware that there are financial conflicts of interest in even the national food guidelines, even in information that's put out by our authorities and policymakers and NHMRC, etc. Those things are what confuse what is absolutely natural to us. If we go out to non-industrialized cultures, they do not have diabetes, they do not have obesity, because they just eat what they're evolutionarily designed to do. And guess what that results in? They maintain insulin sensitivity throughout their whole life, from childhood to elderly. And in modern society, we just have to be aware that excessive consumption of glucose, which is kind of built into all processed foods, will make you lose your insulin sensitivity, and then you will suffer the consequences of chronic disease. And chronic disease, as you mentioned, diabetes and the associations, they're kind of all under the one umbrella. and that drives 90% of our health budget is you're saving people from drowning from chronic disease. We just need to spend a little bit of money on teaching teaching doctors to be lifeguards, teach them to swim. Don't try to save them when they're drowning. Our medical system is sort of skewed towards salvaging people when they're drowning, which costs millions and millions of dollars. If we actually just twisted that around a little bit and said, okay, let's put into place some good policies that change our medical system to be more like lifeguards and teaching people to swim, then we'd make a massive dent into the epidemic of chronic disease and diabetes, which is just out of control.
So if you want to save an overburdened public health system in Australia today, eat low glucose foods. It's a good way to start.
Life diet, LIFE. That's what I made that up. Low insulinemic food, everyone. Low insulinemic food, everyone.
Dr. David Johnson.
That does boil down to reducing your glucose consumption and your carbohydrate consumption.
Dr. David Johnson, thanks very much for your time. I'll let you get back to your patients.
Thanks, Steve.
Dr. David Johnson is a neurosurgeon